I feel like I have a heightened sense of what's going on around me a lot in order to find, without sounding corny, find the funny.
Yeah.
And so I just, my favorite jokes of my own, if you will, are, I'm going to sound like such a, like I didn't put any work in, but they're things that happened to me where all I had to do was tweak something or add a misdirection or, and it was like, oh, like, it's almost, I like when calamity or things happen because it gets me a new joke, you know, because I sometimes I don't, and that's why this last year has been so trying because it's been, I always feel inspired when I'm traveling or I like observing. And now I've been in my fucking apartment. You know what I mean? So it really has been a direct correlation to my lack of just not feeling like, you know, not being able to find funny anywhere other than, you know, and I've got a few COVID jokes, we all do, but at this point, I think we're all looking beyond that to when, you know, life goes back to normal. I don't want to, you know, I don't know. I'm very on the cusp of probably either a really great writing session or a meltdown.
I like that.
We'll see. Yeah.
I like that. That's a great tagline. I like that. What's some of the spins or stuff there? What different perspectives is that you kind of like approach a joke with that kind of like not be a storyteller, but be a joke teller?
Yeah, I think sometimes one of the easiest things or quick things I go to is, for example, everything's perfect. It's perfect. Thinking to myself, like, how would a normal average Joe or Joanne, hopefully, how would they respond to something like that? They and then going in the opposite direction or going in the same direction but going too far. And so those extremes for me, that is a lot of times one, you know, again, a tool that I try to think of when I'm like, what can I do with this? You know, how do I, it's because like, you know, with that one, it's like, I know, you know, blah, 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 blah. But that, you know, that's ridiculous. No one would really say that. But, and so I guess just taking the normal response, because even in my head, I'm like, well, geez, thanks, you know, kind of like a meek little whatever, but going so far with it and then going, when you think you're far enough, going a little bit further with like a letter of recommendation, you know what I mean? Because sometimes, and then you'll find though, that it doesn't always work. And then maybe you try the opposite, you know, maybe you try how dare you? Or, you know, you go a different direction or something. And so that's always something I try to think about just off the cuff because it gives you a direction. You know what I mean?
So kind of in a similar situation to when you were in the waiting room and the woman was trying to just break the silence by asking you kids, this was another situation where you kind of just gave the gynecologist maybe a canned answer, but you wished that the answer would have been what in the joke, you know, kind of where you could be like, does this happen in men's, you know, appointments kind of thing? Like, so there's always kind of like, you kind of always kind of like, when you are doing jokes in which you are in a situation, do you kind of always be like, how do I wish this would have went? Like if I had like if like there was no, you know, consequences for my behavior, how would I wish this could have gone kind of thing?
Yeah, is that fair? Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when you're in situations when you have like some of these like more observational jokes and everything or conversations, like, do you always try to make sure that that the joke comes out cynical or dark humor, or is that just the way your mind works, or is it always like, all right, Mary, I found a punchline over here, but it's not cynical. It's not dark enough. I need to make this dark. Do you kind of focus on kind of keeping to that brand that you have kind of set aside, where it's like, kind of like going back to your dad, kind of you know, slipping one in under the radar, kind of seeing if people are, you know, keeping people on their feet kind of thing? Do you make a conscious effort to keep your jokes in a similar cynical, dark kind of style?
I don't. I sometimes wish I could get out of it. I see I guess sometimes with my sense of humor, I will find something, I can't even think of an example, something silly, like just silly, ridiculous, very, very funny. And then I'll try it and I'll be like, I don't deliver it properly, or I don't know how to make that shift. You know, where does it go? How do I go from being dark and cynical to, you know, it reminds me that
it's helpful then, and you know the way your jokes are very, I would say, like short, and they're not one-liners, but they're you know, like you have so many jokes that you pack into an hour. It's almost incredible and overwhelming to even think about. But you have to have some kind of editing, just because human nature, we're very wordy because we want to get our point across. So we usually give people too much. So how do you kind of work? If I'm not sure if that's you or not, but I'm just most people.
Oh yeah.
Like how do you kind of work back the wordiness? Okay, now you have a premise that people are relating to, and people are now chuckling at certain parts. How do you kind of walk back this editing to kind of keep it in that tight 4 or 5 line kind of joke that you have kind of established now as kind of like a way of writing now for you?
Yeah, and honestly, just trimming fat to the point of if it's not, you know, oh, if you don't need it, get rid of it. Easier said than done. But just dense, you know? I mean, but then I fall into a struggle with that, with wanting to be a little bit more storytelling when a little bit long, you know, longer bits. And I feel like it's almost like without the parameters of the setup punch, or blah, blah, misdirection, blah, you know, that I do tend to ramble and be too wordy. So I think I sort of gravitate towards those very simple structures that, you know, not because I'm good at it, but because I know what to do. It's like the recipe a little bit for the joke,
you're great,
you know?
You're great at it, to be honest. I wish I had the skills there, but yeah, that gravitation. But I mean, how do you identify fat? Let's say, how do you identify fat? Because when you tell a joke and some of it gets laughs and some of it doesn't, how do you differentiate between what's setup and what's filler? Because you already know what the punchlines are. That's what people are laughing at. But how do you differentiate between like the setup that the audience needs to make the punchline make sense and the fat? How do you know the difference?
I think a lot of going into that, a lot of those shorter jokes, the setup punches I would try them out as tweets first.
Okay.
And so that's been a huge, definitely for my more one-liner jokes, or like the joke where I was at the hairdresser and the lady announced she was 37 weeks today, and I congratulated her on her sobriety. Like that sort of thing. Those all were tweets, and they all came from scenarios, you know, like I was at the hairdresser and this woman said that, and in my brain, I congratulated her on her sobriety. I didn't really, though. I wish they had, because she was obnoxious, and nobody gives a shit. Dogs get pregnant every minute, you know. But so I think that the Twitter universe has back when, because I don't know, is it limited now to the characters, or did they
honestly
expand
don't know.
it?
I am very bad with Twitter, so I'm not the one to ask.
But I used Twitter as a first run through for short one-liner jokes, and so if it would do well, I would just try it on stage as is. If not, I would add whatever I needed to make it more conversational. And honestly, I think that's the simplicity and the truth of how I ended up with so many shorter jokes, was doing it that way. So there really wasn't much trimming, because they just started that short, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's brilliant. It really is. And so I want to kind of talk about then your delivery of a joke, because when you're on stage, you're very calm, you're confident, you don't raise your voice, you don't do characters, you don't, you know, you pretty much don't move within the whole hour or whatever from the spot that you come on stage with. How deliberate are you? Now, I know that's probably a lot. I'm sure if I met your father, I'm sure that's, you know, kind of like the same kind of demeanor. But like, how intentional are you to make sure you don't go too act outy or too like in your face? Like, is that intentional to always kind of be this kind of stoic kind of personality on stage, or is that just how there's no thought process to your delivery?
If anything, I'm trying to be more energetic.
Okay.
I remember when I first started, it was that Stephen Wright comic.
Yeah.
They were like, and I'll never forget, a local
Stephen
comic.
Wright's too far on the other end. You're not Stephen Wright either.
Yeah. And I remember doing an open mic one time, and a more veteran Philly comic was like, "Man, you got no energy. You've gotta jazz it up here." You know, I
love
like,
that stuff. I love when they do that.
Look where they are now.
Yeah.
No, they're but it's funny because I like deadpan.
Mm-hmm.
My goal was not to be so like a shtick.
Yeah.
I think I'm getting closer to my normal self on stage now. I'm hoping. I mean, I think that's the goal of any comic. I think in the beginning it was like, how do you tell a joke like this? But it's definitely, I'm not trying to not move around or raise my voice or anything. It's a matter of like comfortability. Like I've done like a little like sketch thing, or you do something on film and someone's like, yell this, and I'm like, hey, like I do not like to look silly or be made fun of when I'm not comfortable. I'm not theatrical. I'm not. So that's why I improv comics and improv and the whole improv world. I look at it with pure just admiration and respect for being able to be so loose and open, because to me, I would rather be curb stomped.
That's funny. That's really